Good evening, welcome. I'm John. I'm a bookseller at Literati Bookstore in downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're so pleased to welcome Jason B. Crawford and Michelle Lietz in support of their recent poetry collections this evening. Just a quick webinar overview for our attendees. The chat is closed, but you can keep the chat window open. I'll be sharing links to purchase collections from tonight's poets throughout the event. And live transcription is available to you on your toolbar using the CC icon. If you're watching us later on YouTube, there are always links to purchase books in the description directly below me. You can also subscribe. There's a little subscribe typewriter button in the video there in the bottom right corner where you can click on it and be kept up to date with all of our At Home with Literati events when they become available on our channel. And as a reminder, you can shop for more books at literatibookstore.com to have shipped to your home anywhere in the United States. And if you live in Southeast Michigan or the Ann Arbor area, our doors are open to the public for in-store shopping. But most of all, we would just like to thank you for your attendance this evening, or this morning, or this afternoon, or much later this evening, depending on where and when in the world you may be joining us. So without further ado, I'll introduce tonight's readers in the order that they will be reading. Jason B. Crawford is a writer born in Washington, D.C., raised in Lansing, Michigan. They're the author of previous chapbooks Summertime Finds, Twerkable, and Good Boy. Year of the Unicorn Kids is their full-length debut. Crawford holds a Bachelor of Science in Creative Writing from Eastern Michigan University and is the co-founder of the Knights Library magazine. Crawford is the winner of the Courtney Valentine Prize for Outstanding Work by a Millennial Artist, Bella Chapbook Contest, and Variant Lit Chapbook Contest. They are the 2021 Outright Chapbook Contest winner in poetry, and their work can also be found in Split Lip Magazine, Class Poetry, and Four-Way Review, among others. They are currently a poetry MFA candidate at the New School. And Michelle Lietz is an American Indigenous writer of mixed Yaqui, European, and Middle Eastern descent and lives in Ypsilanti, Michigan, occupied Anishinaabe land. Her poems have previously been published in Prairie Fire's NBN City issue. Please join me in welcoming Jason B. Crawford and Michelle Lietz into your living rooms.
Oh my gosh, thank you, John. And of course, thank you, Michelle. It's so lovely to see your face on my screen. You being one of my favorite people of all time, of course, and one of the people that helped edit this book, right? So I would be remiss if I did not say that I am so grateful for Literati for hosting this, mainly because Literati was the space in which I became a better poet. It was one of the first bookstores. No, it was the first bookstore I walked into and looked at a poetry section. And when I switched over to being, a poetry major and started buying books, I know the first book I bought, Eduardo C. Corral's his slow muse burn, slow lightning. There it is. And honestly, like I owe so much. I'm pretty sure I have a bunch of points or credits or something at Literati that I need to spend when I come back to Ann Arbor, which I will hopefully be back soon. So yeah, I wrote a book. It came out in March. It is Year of the Unicorn Kids. It's a lot about being queer and trying to find safe space and understanding that there is no safe space. And there's a lot of sex in it. So I'm gonna read a couple poems for y'all and then pass the mic over to Michelle. And I think the best place to start is almost always here. And because we didn't want our fathers to know, we hushed into the school yellow locker rooms, ran across 3 highways of basketball chatter while men screamed at each other over the court's jamboree of screeching new shoes. Something about the breaking of rules or laws or the morality of hunger. We kept quiet in the final row of benches, asked ourselves to bear quivering palms, the soft beasts flicked on by our tongues, the teaching. Oh, the teaching of being young, simple wanting, what anger we can stuff in our jaws, bent the body into silver faucets. There was this one time where we almost got caught. The taste of your flesh rancid in my mouth. After that, every time I'd tell you, no one was in here. No one would find us. No one would even care. I've been wrong before. I will be again. Um, so yeah, when I put this book together, I really wanted to imagine myself in a space of queerness at a younger age as well, because I came out at 23, which is everyone comes out at their own time, but for me it was 23, and I wanted to say what would have happened if I was 10, 11, 12, and I come out at that point. So there is a lot of speculative fiction going on within this book, which is this rewriting of the physical reality of what it would be like if I was younger. And one of those pieces that I did that in would have been this piece right here, which also kind of deals with me being non-binary, me being on the trans spectrum as well, in defense of boys being boys. Maybe it is the black heat of summer, its long freckling prongs forced into our anatomy, the hours of sun we choke down until we become light so much that we only know how to run towards it. Each scoopful of cosmic ray doused in glitter, flickering in our windpipe. Maybe it's the boys we wish we were, the muscle, the masculine, the unsick blood, painted silhouette of a cat's eye dressed in fool's gold foil, the malleable tongue split into gender, its bitter curl around a vile shaft, dismemberment and pickling of the boy body. Maybe it's the way we are taught to love from a distance. The way we look at Terrell in gym class, his fresh pair of white shorts, Stefan running around the track, naked upper frame glistening in salt, Tyrone and his senior bound shoulders bouldering in a thick brown skin, when we are told to two-hand touch Johnny in flag football, and we try not to let our hands slip below his belt, but we envision it all later that night, our fingertips tracing the weight of his hymn, and it's in the language of how we dream it. Crawling our fingers in between a boy's belt loops, reaching into the unzipped fly of his jabots, pulling back a boy flocked in butterflies. Maybe it's just how we are in sixth grade and have been taught we own nothing, including our own cauterized erection, the dichotomy of the meat and what it's worth. Young us, not yet understanding the soreness that thrashing bodies can bring. There's violence in every action. Love is not the exception. We know only of blood staining the silk sheets in our touch. And I guess that is the simplest analogy for currency. At 11, we have not yet learned this form of division. We just know the curvature of James's still quaking abs. And if this is the price of our cocooning body being cracked into a trickling cavity by the blade of a boy's fearful hand careening wildly into our sternum, then bring on the light. We welcome it. Yeah, it's one of my favorite poems here, probably. I have another poem in here that I think maybe actually one of my favorite poems in here, mainly because I like saying it. It's in the first section of the book. So the book's broken down into three sections. It is space, time, space, and reality. So this idea of how we grow up in queerness, how we find space in queerness, and then how we have to rewrite our reality for us to be able to survive. Um, but this one is not a fake story. um, this is true. This did really happen, and there's a little tenderness in here somewhere. I think we'll see. The last fight I got into was over a Dr. Pepper for Ricardo's bitch ass. And let the record show I let him swing first. It was wild vine heaved at my skull like a rogue axe missing the open field of my right jaw as I, not fully ducking, but sidestepped out of his spiked fist reach, grabbed him by his shoulders and slammed him across the locker room floor. And he didn't swing until the third time I told him to do it, only because I wondered if he truly would, if under the lights of all these shiny new phones and brooding smiled boys, he would become a pro boxer, a wrestler, a kung fu master, the clampering crowd egging on his confidence, the annoying way he wanted to be cool, and I wanted to be cool, and nothing was cooler than a fight in the boys' locker room where there were no teachers to play barricade to our rushing testosterone, and how he only would pick fights with everyone he knew he could find his body left buried under, young boy, queer, and unknowing. Placing all his rage into his knuckles, I waited patiently, poking at him with my words like a stick, testing how macho his manhood was in his chest and in his pants. But I couldn't do anything until the first throw of closed palm aimed at my nose like a scoped bullet, and I just moved out of the way, hands ready to return his blood to the dirt. So when we got into the space area, I really wanted to think about not just, so one of the underlining things in this is we're talking about cruising, right? And we're talking about this ancient mystical queer thing called cruising, where you're right, queer cruising. I wanted to really talk about how dangerous the act of intimacy becomes for queer people, and it doesn't have to be in a cruising setting. It can be just the idea of holding hands. It can be the idea of being in a space we deem our own. That space, that idea of owning and having something our own becomes violent. And I wanted to evaluate that. And the way I evaluated it the most and the best was through the idea of cruising. So I feel like there are more cruising poems in the second half of the book than there are in the first half of the book. But either way, there's tons. And some of these are true stories and some are not. But since we're talking about being in Ann Arbor, or since we are in virtually Ann Arbor for myself, I'm gonna read this one. May or may not be a true story. We'll know. Who knows? A sonnet for the woods behind St. Joseph Mercy Hospital. Sneak into the small forest off Gulf Side Road. The boy on your phone tells you to meet him at the browning thicket in the zipped mouth trees. You are sure the thin black fog will be your undoing. A man made of beard and blank face asking you to find him at the corner of nowhere and missing. Scared and horny, you go. Trample through the soft leaves left soiled by the beast hidden in bark sap. The July humidity clings to your shirt like an ex-lover, a night sky filled with scratching dirt and twitching twigs, piles of faggots waiting to be lit under the moon's soft glow. You find the boy, opened. I also, in doing this book, a lot of these poems started as form poems. Not everyone stayed in that form, but a lot of them did start as this idea of a form to give structure, right? So it was me asking how I could break structure. There's something inherently queer about breaking structure. You know what I mean? Um, so I'm gonna read two more poems, and then I'm going to pass it off. But um, in honor again of Michigan, one of my favorite Michigan poets wrote a book called Capable Monsters, and I got to write a golden shovel after him. So, The Art of Staying Alive after Marlon M. Jenkins. And this is the quote I used. True, God did bid me sing, but in the same breath did wish me death, a battle, a birthright to sing until emptied. I claw open the boy and see his true form, light dripping out of a god's body, wet and stale. He looks at me like how I did when I first saw him, like grease that bids with the pot's skin, the boiling over that gambles me dry. What faggot did not somersault out of their mother singing? And that's it. We are used to our lovers causing us pain, but leaving us alive, grinning from the back drenched in honey. Sure, he said he loved me, the crooked way my lip hung from him. The same way his ex would pull the iron from his breath. Silly me to think he cared like I did, to think he'd stretch out his sternum for me to make wishes in between each licked bone. Pissed clean plate that held me a bare meal waiting to be picked apart. A slow death, I guess, where there are 100 mouths and only one fork used to strip me. Lay my face down in the battlefield, my arms stretched out, a glorious pair of wings. I do not know if hurt is my birthright. If I only choose men who will offer me to hungrier men, who shred me to the windpipe to hear me sing, call my voice beautiful until my lungs collapse from being emptied. So I'm gonna read one more. And yeah, then we can have Michelle come jump on here and do a couple poems because we love Michelle. Love you, Michelle. And I'm actually gonna read from the start of the book. Not that poem, not that poem, not that poem. There we go. So there's a bunch of poems in here also that deal with the idea of the antagonist, the unicorn kid, which based off of. So if you see it, Year of the Unicorn Kids. And here's one of them. It's the first one, I guess the second one. Unicorn Kid discovers sugar after Sam Sachs. Before I was certain of my queer limbs and taste for spoiled blood, I would often wonder what bowls of sap my body could fabricate. Watched all the best documentaries of flesh slick and colliding together like a roller derby of hungry mountains. Every video seemed to consummate mouths booming, of bone pearls jangling in the bottom of the jaw. And I always was curious of my body's ability to slush out a graveyard too, a small sanctuary worth praying in. It was something I had to figure out myself. the cum-stained sweat of a man's Velcro tongue sharp across my back, the salt pile we bury deep in our gums left to dry like enamel frosting our placked teeth. I did not have another body to crack me open like a rotten egg. A man with too many fingers pushing against my chest until I was a furnace spewing carbon. I learned this silt on my own, back pressed against the cold plaster, upside down, feet wedged into the corner of the wall, waiting to be crystallized in my own miss. Often I would miss, hit my nose, my neck, my nipples. But sometimes I could position my body just right angle enough. I would acrobat directly into the back of my soft palate. Didn't care much for the bitter film dragging around my breath. Yet I practiced this wide open swallow of liquid fist, tortured myself in the name of filth, pried back my organs, and let the dust spill out when my freshly washed shirt licked up the ash and pretended this wasn't a sandstorm blowing around my throat. Thank you.
It was beautiful, Jason. Thank you. Love your book. Very excited to see it in person. Um, and it is a series of poems that begin with quotes from Tom Petty songs. The first one I'm going to read is called Driving Lessons. Running down a dream that never would come to me, working on a mystery, going wherever it leads. Car dancing is a skill slowly acquired over years of steering wheel tapping, air guitars at stoplights, and an open road offering endless possibility, always familiar in the limitless way new roads remind me of coming home. I never could write funny, but I want to talk about laughter. I know half my road trip humor comes from you. I still laugh when I can remember you drumming on the steering wheel, radiant sunshine, always encouraging both of us to turn the radio loud, sing obnoxiously, unapologetically, to prove it doesn't matter how bad we were at it. And I'd close my eyes at the sound of a harmonica, always my weakness. I laugh now, remembering drumming on the steering wheel, windows down, air guitar in the car, and tailgating, while telling me to always keep my hands at 10 and 2. See, my father, he was always more do as I say, not as I do. Spoke in lessons, but never told me stories. And I learned more from watching him than I ever did from listening. My mother once told me we both think of our fathers when that song plays. Hers on a California highway, another Dell in the passenger seat. And I wonder if they were both running. The funny thing is, I still tell people, my dad used to say he invented the air guitar. This next poem is called Deer Crossing. Real love is a man's salvation. The weak ones fall, the strong carry on. You know, when I was a kid, I fell in love so easily. I often lived vicariously through someone else's stories, lost in worlds I rarely saw myself in. There's a story my people used to tell about a deer who had the power to turn invisible. Such power kept it alive long past its prime. People always assume there's some easy lesson in such a story, at the end, usually. And the end of the invisible deer seems anticlimactic. Old and ready to die, the deer reveals itself to the hunters who, over these many years, never gave up the chase. The hunters, unimpressed with the meat left on the bones, turn and leave. So maybe there's a lesson about chasing, the fantasy preferable to reality. A professor of mine once said, when I told him the story, that he could see a metaphor of women, their beauty and power lessening over the years. But when I closed my eyes, pictured that dear, I see intelligent, gentle eyes. Think of all the times deer have showed us the way through mountains, valleys, and fields of wildflowers. And I'm reminded sometimes survival means becoming your own ghost, visible only to those who already know how to see. Next one is called Driver Picks the Music. Call out the instigator because there's something in the air. We've got to get together sooner or later because the revolution's here and you know it's right and you know that it's right. We always talk a good game, veer away from dystopian futures and imagine instead a reality of crumbling institutions, a decolonized world, listening for the death rattle of capitalism, like indigenizing the Federation of Planets to include a 24th century grown past the Tonto stereotypes. Because the most relatable thing Chakotay ever said was, "I want to go home," when describing an Arizona sunset. But I check myself and admit it might actually be closer to the 25th. The daily reminders that most of my friends can't even hear the triggers that set me off over the laugh tracks. And I wonder how a ghost can join a revolution. Maybe I say they call this ice in my veins a sure sign of burnout. When you slow down, count the heartbeats in the room of everyone in the room who locked knowing eyes, like our pulses align as we roll our eyes, too tired now to fake it. My father always told me, you can't pick your battles, or pick your battles, you can't fight them all. And I wonder if he ever bothered to pick any worthy fights at all. Like listening to a rant about taxes and birth control, I tell him, I just want to change the world. And how long is this revolution going to take if my own father can't even get past the past tense? Can I take the beat, press pause on a broken record to point out the missing pieces? My pulse skips with each groove you've forgotten was even there. Like I can't really envision an intersectional movement when they only see museum quality monstrosities. And I know my revolution will never be televised because they still can't get past the past tense. I remember the day I told him my vision of a world changed, where gender was never a binary and sexuality was a personal journey. Guns didn't radicalize toxic masculinity, and I wasn't afraid on every dark street. He said, "You're dreaming, babe," and laughed when I said, "I'm not the only one." This one's called American Girl. Raised on promises, she couldn't help thinking that there was a little more life somewhere else. Morning's burning sage lingers in the threads of a too thin sweater. Ceremony lingers well past closing. Midnight, a dark parking lot. We played our snapshots of drum circles, one dancing, one singing. In a world of our own, we celebrated our births. You, remembering fancy dancing. Me, singing American Girl, because I never learned the dance, but I could shape these words to match the beat. Between cigarettes and sweetgrass and the heartbeat of ceremony drums, we'd quote smoke signals from memory, contemplate absence of fathers, forgiveness, and forgetting. My grandfather was a truck driver for over 40 years, and I wonder how many of his favorite songs I sing to on long drives, and does he sing with me? Sometimes I like to think he takes these opportunities to get to know me. I can't help but feel him when the sun slants just right. Long shadows on a long winter road, and I count the turns to home. It's important on long, lonely drives to have a good co pilot playing DJ. I wonder what stories my grandpa told late at night on a CB radio. Sometimes I think, had I been a stranger, I could have known him better. Most days, I'm just a well worded contradiction, knowing I'm missing more than I know, wondering why you're here more often as a ghost than you ever were alive. Not quite sure what my timing is looking like. I think I got about two more. This one's called Feeding the Fire. You can live on nothing at all, and I ain't gonna be hungry no more. There are days when nothing really happens at all. I count my breaths just to do something. Close my eyes, listen for the wind, the quiet music of rustling leaves, and I think if I could time travel, I'd hang out often in a slower paced time, if such a thing ever really existed, like when we'd visit and speak with the intention of a journey. Because the truth is, the constant grind of these trying times is burning out the brightest flames in everyone I love. And spending a day just being brings all the baggage of our slow burn apocalypse, crippling anxiety of never having done enough. There are days when I wonder if I can truly forgive the generations before me for their silence, complicity, belligerent adherence to living by stealing from descendants, believing it'd never catch up to them. In the midst of mass extinction, my mother tells me she also wonders at her generation. When they lost their fire for justice, when they put aside their desire for a better world and settled for a life unexamined, or I guess sometimes surviving instead of revolution. But the cycles of time keep compounding. Ancient monsters still stalking, and not talking about monsters doesn't mean they disappear. I'd much rather shine a light than fear the dark. So to feed the fire inside my veins, I gave up settling. This one is called Almost Home. We were caught up in a barroom fight till an Indian shut out the lights. I'm so tired of being tired. As sure as night will follow day, most things I worry about never happen anyway. The thing about storytellers, they never tell the same story twice. Not really, because the cadence changes with each breath, and even practice phrases are heard with different ears. And sometimes I wonder what it is about words strung together in precise, often clumsy strings of sounds. And what do we lose in a story never heard? When I was young, my mother told me about bounties, the body unwanted, reduced to a fraction, a head, a scalp, an ear, a life lost for much less than 30 pieces of silver. But these days, I think bounties are harder to see. Revealed instead, the payment rests in the freedom to walk away. And I wonder at the nature of things, time and its echoing themes as I bury my kin, the missing indicative of the anger I cannot abandon. I don't know what to do with the pressure building beneath my chest, difficult to swallow, words leaking out like water that just keeps flowing in monsoon season, little rivers like veins down concrete, And I know you can flow to the river just this side of home, that place we're always trying to get back. Wikipedia says survivor's guilt is a manifestation of PTSD. And I wonder if that's why I Googled the 44-year-old man who slammed into my cousin's car, his life stolen on a California road for seconds of someone else's easy distraction. And I don't think it's survivor's guilt fueling my rage. He told me once he couldn't ever be drafted. He said he was the only one who could carry our family name. They couldn't make us disappear, not that way. But maybe my family has been running for so long because stories of returning home only end in tragedy. Regardless, somehow I too always crawl back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jason, for your incredible poems, and truly warming the soul on here in Ann Arbor, at least a really dreary, cold, rainy day. Thank you. It's just a little bit speechless. Those were just incredible poems. We can't thank you enough. You can purchase You're the Unicorn Kids and Occasionally Petty from Literati. There's links in the chat if you're watching us live. And if you're watching us later on YouTube, there are always links in the description below me to purchase books from Literati Bookstore. Michelle and Jason, I hope we can have you in the store to read from your next collections in the not too distant future. But until then, please be well. And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at the next event. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.